Welcome back to talkSPORT USA, talkSPORT's dedicated NFL YouTube channel with myself, Will Varney, here in London, ahead of the final London game of the International Series this weekend on Sunday. The LA Rams taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, live at Wembley on talkSPORT 2 from 2:30. Pleasure to say, to give me a bit more insight into the Jacksonville Jaguars, their positive start to the season. Pleasure to say ESPN's Jacksonville Jaguars reporter Mike DiRocco joins me. Mike, welcome to London. Great to have you. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me. Long flight, got in a little early. Going to get caught up tired-wise later, I think, but feel great right now anyway.
Look, we're feeling alive, and so are the Jacksonville Jaguars. Look, 4-2 to start the season. Just wanted to get your overall thoughts on their start to the season, because it feels like there is a great amount of positivity, belief in the building right now.
Yeah, it's such a total 180 from what we saw in there last year when it was just a mess in Doug Peterson's final year. But Liam Coen has, along with Tony Boselli and James Gladstone, but really Liam Coen has infused a lot of energy and a bit of attitude, a bit of swagger in this building and in the locker room in particular, which has been missing for a while. And I think you can see that on the field in the way these guys play. They've played 6 games. In 5 games, they've been the more physical, tough team, with the one exception being last week against Seattle. But that is sort of who they want to be. They want to be a physically and mentally tough team. And what we've seen out of them, being able to run the ball, getting the turnovers that they had, 14, and sort of controlling both lines of scrimmage, has sort of kind of juiced up this organization a little bit. And it's been something that's been missing for so long.
Before we get into the good stuff, I wanted to look back at last weekend just briefly, because I don't know whether it maybe was a bit of a shot in the arm, a bit of a wake-up call, but that defeat to the Seahawks, there were slight concerns, you could say, whether it be the kicking game, the fact that Trevor's sacked 7 times. Has that potentially stalled some of that positivity, the fact they could have come to London 5-1 and really they let that game slip?
I don't think it's stalled some of the positivity. It's a good learning experience for this group, because that, like I mentioned a moment ago, was the one time where they weren't the more physical team. And you see what happens. Now, that's a really good defensive front that the Seahawks have. So, some struggles were expected. But, getting the quarterback hit 17 times, both offensive tackles, Anton Harrison and Walker Little really struggled in the pass rush, or against the pass rush. So it was disturbing to see, but I still think that's the aberration. I don't think that's who they are. Now, this week will tell us a lot, because the Rams have a really good defensive front as well. And we'll find out, how do they respond to adversity? Because that's been one of Liam Coen's huge messages is, okay, it's not going to go great all the time. So when you get punched in the mouth, or when there is some adversity, when you have a bunch of penalties, when you throw an interception or what have you, how do you respond? And so far, with the exception of last week, this team has responded well. So you want to see that happen again on Sunday against the Rams.
And you said it's such a stark difference to what was last season under Doug Peterson, right? And this is a team now with, it feels like there is momentum and that air of positivity. A lot of it, you mentioned, stemming from the head coach. Now, Liam Coen's his arrival, there was a bit of skepticism about him coming in. He's coming in as an OC, and then he's done it for 1 year and then comes in as a head coach. He's a play-calling head coach in his rookie year. So dealing with all of this, how impressed have you been with the impression that he's made on this team so early, only in the first 6 weeks of the season?
Really impressed. The one thing you don't know about guys that aren't head coaches, haven't ever been a head coach before, is how are they going to be in front of the room? How are they going to be in terms of a leader? Are they going to be able to reach the guys with a message? Are they going to be able to set a culture that these guys buy into? And the answer for that last one is absolutely 100%. And he, I'm not in any team meetings, but the Jaguars sure post a lot of videos from those team meetings, and I've talked to players. He's fantastic in front of the room. And when guys, the buy-in is there, as long as you have the talent, then there's going to be success and there's going to be improvement. Now, he's gotten a lot of support, too, from Tony Boselli, the EVP, and James Gladstone, the GM, who was, those two have also helped with that. But really, Liam's the front-facing guy of the franchise. He's the guy the players deal with the most, and they have bought into what, I don't want to say what he's selling, because he's not selling anything, but they have certainly bought in. And, you can see it in the difference in the results.
He comes across as incredibly charismatic. Just the media availability that we were at just a couple of hours ago, just how he comes across and how he carries himself really did sort of take me back a bit, because I mentioned there was this skepticism, there was all this sort of dark cloud after how he left Tampa. But like you say, the impact that he's already had on a young team, and maybe the impact that he's having on his quarterback as well. I have to ask you about Trevor Lawrence. There's always so much noise surrounding Trevor. It's his fifth year in the league, and maybe that noise is because of how he came into the league. The fact is he was the number 1 overall pick, and he was seen as this generational talent. What have you seen in terms of his development working under Liam Coen so far through these first 6 weeks?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is this is, his third head coach, fourth offensive system that he's worked in since, he left Clemson, if you count that last year at Clemson. So that's a lot of adjusting, a lot of newness to learn, a lot of new offensive systems to learn. So, I think he's making the progress that you want to see him make in terms of the mental aspect of it. He knows the offense. He's done a phenomenal job of killing plays into line of scrimmage that don't match what they're seeing, getting them into the right play. Liam Coen said, he's agreed with Trevor's changes about 95% of the time, which is a ridiculously high percentage. So from that standpoint, he's on pace, and he's exactly where you want him to be. He's still got moments in every game where he'll make 2 or 3 throws and you'll be like, what the heck was he seeing? Why? But then there's also those 2 or 3 throws in this game that you go, whoa. Not a lot of guys make that throw. The one throw down the sideline to Brian Thomas Jr. against Kansas City in the Monday night game, that was a phenomenal. That may have been the best throw of his entire career. I think he's still not seeing everything as quickly as he needs to on the field in this offense. There's been a lot of times when they've had some shots called down the field, especially to Travis Hunter, and it's been there, and he's taken the check down instead of trying to get the ball down the field. Same thing with Brian Thomas. There have been some shots that he didn't take, and I think part of that has been, for the last 3 years, the one thing that's been jammed into his head is don't turn it over. Don't turn it over. You turn the ball over too much. Don't turn it over. Don't turn it over. Was it 60 turnovers in his first 3 seasons, 61 turnovers? So I think there's still part of him mentally that's like, I got to be careful with the ball. And maybe instead of taking a riskier throw, he'll take the check down. But for this offense to really function at the high level, he's got to be willing to take more risks. And as the season goes on, if he does start doing that, then I think this offense can be even better.
It feels like he's doing more at the line of scrimmage as well in terms of his checks and protections, and it feels like sometimes that is a bit of a hindrance. We're seeing, the plays getting off very late, so we're seeing these, pre-snap penalties, but it feels like he is being given more responsibility, and that trust, like you say, growing with his head coach, right?
Yeah, and when you watch some of the games, he's got to line guys up. Unfortunately, sometimes he's got to call guys in motion some other times, which, that not everybody is 100% on everything. Yeah. Even though we're 6 weeks into the season, I still think, especially young guys like Travis Hunter, there still is a little bit of hesitation. You can see it in some of the routes that he runs too. But, when the quarterback has to be responsible for everything, it does sort of slow things down play-wise, maybe a half a second. He's worrying about, is this guy in motion in the right spot? Is this guy lined up on my left, or is he supposed to be on my right? I got to move him. I got to change the play. So, there can be a lot of stuff going on in the line of scrimmage in that finite time to get it snapped, and that does sometimes bleed over into the play because his head's not always in the right spot that it needs to be.
You mentioned about impact players. You bring in Travis Hunter. You're aggressive in the draft. You trade up to go get him. Have to ask you about him before we get into whether it's sustainable that he can do both offense and defense for the rest of his career. The impact that he's had so far through these first 6 weeks, is it what you expected? Is it potentially less? What have you seen so far from Travis with the Jags?
I thought he would be more involved offensively, and by that I mean just have more volume of catches and would have found the end zone by now. But he certainly, when he's had the ball in his hands and they've gotten it to him in space, he's special. You can see that. And he had 2 guys within 3 yards of him after a reception last week and juked both. And you just sit there and you watch it and you go, that's some special talent right there. It's sometimes harder to measure the impact he has as a corner, but there was a potential game-saving pass breakup that got called pass interference against Cincinnati in week 2 that, the officials later came back and said, yeah, we messed that up. But he's like he lined up against Jackson Smith-Njigba last week against Seattle after Smith-Njigba had a couple of big plays and, kind of shut him down a little bit there.
Yeah.
So it's harder to measure that because they're not throwing to his guys, so you don't see the big pass breakups. You don't see the interceptions. But he has certainly changed the way the Jaguars operate offensively when he's on the field. I think you see a difference in that offense. I think that's the threat of the big play is there. Now, Liam Coen said this week, got to design more plays, got to get more plays called where he's the number one option because they've got to start taking advantage of that athleticism, his ball skills. I mean, he made 2 great catches down the field on one against San Francisco, one against Kansas City. Try and do more of that. Let's if you're the Jags, you have to be like, let's use the guy that we took number 2 overall because Brian Thomas isn't playing at the high level that he needs to play at. They're missing Brenton Strange, who is a huge part of their pass game. So they've got to start taking advantage of what he can do offensively.
And that's it. If you're trading up to get an elite level talent, then they have to make that impact on a team. And right now, I mentioned it there. Is it sustainable for him to continue to play both positions? Are you getting the best out of him? Could he be an elite level wide receiver if you fully put him in at receiver and don't worry about corner? Do you think this is what he's going to continue to do for his career in terms of playing both and being a two-way player? Or do you think there will come a time where they go, no, we need to nail him down in one position and one position only?
Yeah, playing 2 ways is more of a younger man's thing, I mean, and at 21, 22 years old, he's got the energy, his body's not beat all to heck about it. So that's going to be the path that he takes and the franchise takes over the next 2 or 3 years, without a doubt. He's got elite cornerback skills. So if you said to me, if he could only play one, where would you play him? I probably would say I'd play him on defense. He's already at a pretty high level there. Offensively, he ran some limited route trees at Colorado. It's not as complex as what Liam Coen's system is, and Liam Coen and other players have said, hey, look, yeah, this is a tough system to learn. He's still not 100% sure where he's going to be at times, where he's supposed to be at times. So if he can get all that stuff ironed out, then I think he can make an impact consistently on both sides of the ball. I think it would take him longer if he just lined up at wide receiver to be an elite wide receiver than it would be at corner. Now, I'll give the Jags credit. They said to him, look, you're going to learn one receiver spot this year because we're not going to ask you to learn 3 receiver spots. It's just unfair. So they've kept him in the slot, and that's maybe limited some of the things they can do with him. But like I said before, they're going to try and do some more plays where he's the primary target. But I think overall, if you said to me, which one is he, I would probably say he's probably a really, really, really good corner. And that's where, if he has to settle on one side of the ball, I think that might be where it is.
And this defense has stood out through these first 6 weeks of the season. Maybe surprisingly, considering, they were last in the league in takeaways last year. They now lead the league. Anthony Campanile comes in from the Packers. And it feels like I saw somebody compare this mesh that his... it's almost a bit of Jeff Hafley, it's a bit of Robert Saleh, it's a bit of Brian Flores and these blitz packages. It's a bit of everything, and it feels like we're seeing that week in, week out. It's so impressive to watch, right? Are you surprised by that quick impact, and are we even going to see even more, considering this is just 6 weeks into the season that we're seeing players learn this scheme under Anthony?
There's always, generally, when you bring in a new guy, especially someone who has that kind of enthusiasm, there's going to be a bump. But I didn't expect the bump to go for them to go from here to here that quickly. Maybe a gradual step up. But getting those turnovers, the 14 in the first 5 games, it's injected some life into a defense that didn't really have any the last year and a half. I mean, last year guys are talking about players are quitting. They weren't in love with the defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen. They had essentially a hockey shift rotation going on there. Guys just weren't happy. So they get a guy in that they like, and the system is very aggressive. And that's what they really like. It's a zone concept system, too, on the back end, which gives those corners eyes on the quarterback a lot more, gives them more opportunities to make plays on the ball, which has contributed to those interceptions. Jordan Lewis has been a phenomenal signing at one corner over there. Eric Murray, the safety they signed from Baltimore, has been fantastic in the back end, fixed the communication. Last year, they led the league in pass plays given up of 30 or more yards last year, and Eric Murray has really solidified the back end there. So, there's been some other things that have happened in addition to Anthony Campanile, but they like the system. When they like the system and they like the coach, you generally get success.
And like you say there are things they need to iron out, potentially looking at that pass rush. You have missed Trayvon Walker in recent weeks with injury as well, so you bring him back. What can he do alongside Josh Hines-Allen? One player who's stood out who won't be playing this week is Devin Lloyd with that calf injury, but the impact that he's had, and this is a guy, again, I often think when you look at a defensive coordinator and they're able to maximize the potential of a player who has struggled in the seasons that he's had, there have been questions, surely he's going to get a big extension right now. Is he not? Is he not thinking, goodness me, come on guys, or do the Jacksonville Jaguars not have the cash to pay him?
Well, they've got cash to pay him. I don't think that's anything they're even going to consider until the end of the season, obviously. But yeah, Anthony Campanile has done a phenomenal job with him. Devin Lloyd's biggest problem wasn't athleticism. It wasn't, speed. It wasn't, just football instinct. He was not where he was supposed to be. He sometimes got caught up in, they call it a little eye candy. The defenses or the offenses are trying to confuse guys, and he would get caught up in that, and he'd be out of position. And when you're out of position, even by a step defensively in the NFL, that's a big play waiting to happen. But they've found a role for him this year, and they've simplified what they're asking him to do, and they're getting him to rush the passer more too, which he's actually pretty good at, and the previous staffs really didn't do much with him. And the ball's finding him. You know what I mean? Like, 4 interceptions, a fumble recovery. I mean, he's just been where he's supposed to be, and when you're generally where you're supposed to be, you make big plays. So, and you mentioned, it's a contract year for him. Sometimes these guys in contract years, they ball out and have the best years of their career. Now, it puts the Jags in a little bit of an interesting spot because they probably don't want to franchise tag him, because that includes all the linebackers like the pass rushers and Myles Garrett and guys like that, that you're going to have to factor that in salary-wise, and that number will be pretty high. So if you're Devin Lloyd and you continue on the pace you're having right now, you probably sit there and go, I'm going to test the market and let me see what I can get. And then if the Jags are okay with matching or can get close and I want to stay here, then I'll stay here. But I don't expect the team to offer him an extension at this point, before the season's over anyway.
Well, it's going to be a shame that we're not going to see him on Sunday. Final couple of questions from me, Mike. Really appreciate your time. You mentioned there about, extensions, potentially looking ahead towards the trade deadline coming up at the start of November. It's a team, we've already seen the Jags make that move where they, Campbell goes off to the Browns and Greg Newsome comes to the Jags, and it feels like that's a really nice fit, like you mentioned, with the zone coverage on the back end. He's a zone corner. Do you feel like this is a team that could be more aggressive? Could we see this in the trade deadline? Could we see them maybe look at a pass rusher? Could we see them look towards a Trey Hendrickson, for example, or another player of that ilk? Or is there another position you maybe look at and think, James Gladstone, Liam Coen, Tony Pacelli, they're looking at that thinking that's potentially a weakness we could strengthen?
Yeah, I don't see pass rusher. Certainly not like Trey Hendrickson, because that's going to involve a lot of money this year, and then you don't have him under contract beyond this. You got to work out some kind of an extension, and I don't see that happening. I do think that they are going to be active. It'll be more picks. They've got a lot of picks, and James Gladstone worked under Les Snead, and we know the name of the philosophy of their, whatever them picks. Yeah. So yeah, I think that they will be a little more aggressive between now and November 4. Tight end, honestly, seems to me like an area that they might take a look at, just because Strange is out for at least 3 more weeks, maybe 4. They don't have another pass-catching option. There's a guy, Mark Andrews, a guy in Baltimore, is a potential older guy, not expensive. He can give you a little bit. Even when Strange comes back, he can fit into that offense pretty well. Then they have 2 options at tight end. Interior defensive line, I think, is another area that they're going to look at, because they're not getting any kind of production pass rush-wise from there other than Eric Armstead. But they're not getting enough. When you don't have an inside push on the pass rush, it makes it tougher on your edge guys, Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, because then they've got to win everything. And what you want is that inside pass rush to kind of push that quarterback back, make him go one way or another, and then he just falls right into the defensive end's hands there. So tight end, interior defensive lineman, I think, would be 2 areas what I'd expect them to target.
So to Sunday then, big game coming up. You know, they knock off a Super Bowl contender a couple of weeks ago in the Kansas City Chiefs. You go up against now the LA Rams, who it feels it's a bit of a Super Bowl or bust for them with Matthew Stafford. How big a challenge does Sunday present? And also, is it almost a litmus test once again of where the Jacksonville Jaguars are at as a team if they're able to say get a win over the LA Rams and Sean McVay?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the thing, nobody knows yet if Puka Nacua is going to play. If he doesn't play, that's huge for the Jaguars. But the Jaguars have to show that they're not the offensive line that we saw last week. To me, that's the whole key to this game. They've got to be able to handle that LA Rams defensive front. Jared Verse, Young, Fisk. I mean, that's a load up there. And we didn't see this line respond well last week against the Seahawks. So it's got to play better. The thing that, you know, Liam Coen joked about it the other day. Don't trust Matt Stafford's eyes. Don't trust where he's looking if you're on defense. Don't. He's going to burn you if you do. I mean, he's been around for so. There's nothing the Jags can throw at him that's going to confuse him. You know what I mean? So you just got to really, if there's plays to be made, you have to make them defensively. If Nacua is not able to play, then I think that's a huge benefit for them. I think they will try and get aggressive defensively at times, try and get in Stafford's face, force some quick throws, some errant throws, and take advantage of that. But again, to me, it's all on that offensive line. They've been able to run the ball really, really well all year until last week. If they can create some space in that run game and they can get Travis Hunter out there on the edge, couple of throws here and there in space, maybe he makes a big play here and there, I think they got a chance to win that game. I would probably pick the Rams to win it in a close one, just because I think that defensive front is really, really good. And McVay and Coen know each other so well, and you know they're going to have something for him, and he's going to have something for them. And it's just at this point, I probably go with the more experienced quarterback too, and Matthew Stafford is still playing at a high level.
Well, let's hope for some entertainment. That's what we want, a back-and-forth game on Sunday. That's what we want at Wembley to finish off the London series. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining me here on talkSPORT.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a blast.